Okay, today we have the NIKKORMAT FT2. In Japan it was called the NIKKOMAT, N-I-K-O, mat, and in America it was the NIKKORMAT. So that's how you can tell the difference between where they were marketed. This is kind of like a Pentax K1000. When they were making the F2 and some of the pro cameras, this was the consumer level camera. It doesn't have as many bells and whistles. The battery only works the meter, but this is one of those cameras that is just, I found this for $30 and this was such a beauty. It's black, it's in mint condition, it's hardly ever been used, I think. The other FTs, the FT1 and the FTN, they didn't have hot shoes built in. They built this hot shoe in. And I'm not the biggest fan of on-camera flashes, you know, but that's a really well-made camera, and at that price, it's difficult to say no, you know what I mean? It's like the Olympus in that the shutter speeds are here around the collar of the lens. You actually change your shutter speeds here, not up here like usual on most of these cameras. And then the apertures are just on your lens like always. Now, this camera is dependent on metering with this pin right here. You notice this one little silver pin. This prong is not lined up with that pin. This lens is not properly mounted. So if you were using this, you couldn't meter properly because this prong was made for that little pin. So the way you have to load or mount a lens on a NIKKORMAT is you have to put the lens at f5.6. And then you have to push this pin over to the far right of the lens. And then when you mount this, that didn't get it. See, it's still not caught. You can see how it's not caught. So let's try that again. Maybe I didn't have it down far enough. I think that's what happened. This has to be all the way over so that it can catch. Now do you see how it's catching that pin? How the ears, they call these ears on the lens. That's what those ears are for. And now they're catching the lens. And now it just clicked into place. Now see how that pin is inside those ears and it's changing? So that's how the camera knows what aperture you're at. If you're not at if you don't have that in there, the camera doesn't know what aperture you're at. They're not communicating. This is before any electronic communication. So this is very important that you have that lined up with that. And again, let's go back to, if you want to take the lens off, you have to put it on 5.6, and then when you turn it off, the lens will come off. When you want to put it back on, make sure that's all the way over, because you have to put the camera on while the lens is on you have to put the lens on while the lens is on 5.6, and then that will go right into that pin right when it starts to mount, and then it'll stay in. So it's very important. 5.6 is the magic number for mounting your lenses, making sure your ears are lined up. If it doesn't hit, if you end up loading it like you first saw this camera was, just take it off and redo it. The on and off switch, they made it with the shutter advance, and they were so happy with that. They've kept that for many, many generations of cameras afterwards. So that turns on the camera and turns on the meter, and that turns it off. It's real simple. There's a depth of field preview button here, which just literally shuts down the lens, stops it down to where the actual lens is set. If you can see that, I'm not sure you can see that. And it's got a shutter release, and it's got a rewind, and there's not much else to this camera. Basically, it's a match needle system. You just basically line up a needle in the center between a plus and a minus to get the meter reading at 0, and that's supposed to be the proper exposure. Of course, oops, sorry, I keep hitting the tripod today. Of course, that's an 18% gray setting, and that means you have to compensate for if you notice that you're shooting something extremely bright or extremely dark. This camera takes a battery only. There's no place down here for a winder. You don't notice any kind of a gear that you can put a motor drive into. So this camera doesn't have any kind of motor drive available. A simple rewind button and a tripod socket, self-timer, and again, this FT2 is in such clean shape, it's hard not to pick up a camera like this and use it for my students. The shutters, check it like always. There's a little mark right here. It tells you what shutter speed you're at. It says 250. And that sounds different than, here's a 15th. And that sounds slower. And here's a quarter, here's a half. So you can tell the shutters are working. Here's a 15th. Again, so my whole thing is, you know, maybe the shutters aren't 100% accurate to the exact speed, but they're pretty close. And film has some latitude, so this doesn't go in for repair. It's in very clean condition. It's got a little window up here that if you're trying to set exposure without looking through the viewfinder, it actually shows you the meter reading right here in this little window. Again, a fun little camera, pretty basic. A mechanical camera, the battery only runs the meter. It doesn't run the camera at all. So with no battery at all, or in freezing cold temperatures, you can still use the camera. It will always work in all shutter speeds. There's no electronic necessary, no battery necessary for a shutter. And of course the aperture is all completely mechanical. So that's the NIKKORMAT FT2. I like it a lot. It's in this one is so especially clean. It's hard to not, you know, fall in love with things like this and go, oh my God, I gotta take that out and give it some use, and I will. And like I said, it's good for teaching. It's one of those cameras. It's all metal. It's solid. I can use it, and nobody's going to have any issue with, you know, it was bumped into a doorway and it broke. It's not going to break. And there's not a whole lot of money into it. It's a very inexpensive camera. And Nikon 50mm f2 lens, not a 1.4, still plenty good, plenty sharp. They came with a Nikon filter. Again, this camera's ready to go. And I would have no trouble putting a roll of film in it, giving it to a student, and trusting that it would process well and it would develop. So that's the Nikon FT2. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. I love answering questions when I can. And if you like these reviews, please hit the subscribe button, and I will bring more to you all the time. Thanks so much. Thanks for watching.